Welcome, everybody, to IS-PEC Talks, bridging evidence to policy and practice in ideally 15 minutes. We're privileged today to have Professor Jeremy Grimshaw, a leading figure, or probably the leading figure, shall we say, in implementation science and evidence-based healthcare, as well as one of IS-PEC's strategic advisors on the podcast today. Globally renowned for his groundbreaking contributions to implementation science, Professor Grimshaw's seminal research has shaped the field and made a profound and lasting impact. In addition to his scientific achievements, he's held numerous key leadership roles in the global evidence community over the past 30 years. Thank you so much for being here.
Wonderful to be here.
Okay.
Thank you for the invitation.
So let's start with an easy question. You've spoken extensively over the years, and thank God I've been privileged to hear you, about the challenges in bridging the gap between research and implementation science, research and practice. What practical strategies are a win-win in your eyes in this field?
Actually, we have a large number of strategies that we know in general work. The challenge that we face is none of them work all the time. And we often are not very good at working out under what circumstances a particular strategy will be a great fit for the problem and the context. But one win-win that I would strongly argue for is audit and feedback. So this is a process where we measure the performance of a healthcare professional and we provide feedback to tell them how they're doing, either compared to their peers or some sort of gold standard. And we now have almost 300 randomized controlled trials of audit and feedback across all areas of clinical practice, across all areas of the world, that demonstrates that it leads to improvements in practice of the order of 4 to 6% in absolute terms. So this is data that is just about released as an updated Cochrane review by Noah Ivers. It seems to me that we have such a body of evidence that if this was a treatment for cancer or a treatment for heart disease, we would be saying, why on earth are we not doing this? And we are seeing governments and jurisdictions around the world taking up this intervention, but it feels like it's a very foundational support for healthcare professionals to do high quality care. There's also a nice systematic review by colleague Lynn Moore that shows that in general audit and feedback is likely cost savings. And on a recent study that was done by a colleague Kevin Schwartz and Noah Ivers looking at feedback for antibiotic prescribing in Ontario, it suggested that the payback was 3.5 times the investment. So we have something which is highly effective, that is basically likely saves money. Why on earth are we not doing this more regularly? I think for other interventions, it's probably, we need to be more careful about what the fit is, but we have things that we could do tomorrow that would likely improve quality of care and the uptake of research. Okay.
I'm excited to see this because I know Noah's been working on this forever. So I'm very excited for it to finally come out. But a few questions on this. So you say, if this was a treatment for cancer or heart disease, it would be criminal not to use it. But providing high quality care, it's also just as criminal not to use this if we know that this works. So how can we make it? How can we implement it? If we know it works, shouldn't there be some sort of regulation to make it happen, to require it?
Well, so the issue is that, I think we have a problem with implementation science. And one of the issues is that it's not quite clear who are the receptors who need to who will enact implementation in service settings. We need to move this outside of the research environment to much more service environment. So, a good example of this is that the study I mentioned by Kevin Schwartz and Noah Ivers, this was feedback that was provided through Public Health Ontario. So through a public body doing this as part and parcel of part and parcel of how they want to address antimicrobial resistance in their province. And we need to see, basically, these need to be decisions by I don't know if it's the Israel government, if it's the health authority in Israel or the insurance companies, but we need people at that level who've got some responsibility for trying to be custodians of the quality of care for the citizens that they serve, to basically say, we will do this. Often people say, it's too expensive, but as I said, we're showing repeatedly that actually this cost savings and is beneficial if you're trying to take it forward. So I do think that I think we need to think more carefully about how we build relationships with decision-making groups that will have responsibility for implementation activities in service settings. And then we need to make sure we're providing information to them that is helpful. In audit and feedback, one of the ways that we have been doing this is, for the last 8 to 10 years, we've had an international study group called the Audit and Feedback Meta Lab. And this is a group now of about 50 scientists around the world who are investigating audit and feedback as a major part of their research. And often they are doing this with service partners. And so they're able to actually do very large-scale evaluations of audit and feedback at the level of thousands of healthcare professionals or whatever. But within those, we also work very carefully to sort of make sure that the service partners are hopefully getting benefit from this. And we're providing information that will help them make the argument in their jurisdiction that we should be doing audit and feedback, but also practical tips about how they could organize this, and also encouraging service providers to talk to service providers. So I think the field of implementation science needs to think much more carefully about how we identify the receptors for implementation science and work with them so that it moves into service settings. But in the audit and feedback space, we have already done a fair amount of work in this space that, and we're seeing basically the uptake of audit and feedback in jurisdictions. One example would be in 2020, really bad timing, but there's this, the Italian government mounted a very large audit and feedback program across, I think, 7 regions in Italy. And basically they were able to come to the International Audit and Feedback Meta Lab and get advice and support about how they should do this, how they should enact it.
Okay, so one more question on audit and feedback, and then we'll move on. So we know a lot in healthcare about alert fatigue. Is there a similar effect in audit and feedback that after a certain amount of time or different areas of audit and feedback, it just loses its touch?
So it's a really good question. I'm not sure that is something that we know. You could answer it in a number of ways. I mean, one is the previous audit and feedback reviews suggested that the number of times you provided audit and feedback was an important modifier, that you provided feedback more than once, you get larger effect sizes. The latest version didn't find that. So I think we don't quite know. It feels common sense that if you gave feedback more regularly, that would be beneficial. I mean, the other issue is that in general, people provide audit and feedback. You can't provide audit and feedback on every aspect of practice, because you'd give tomes of information to a family doc in Tel Aviv or wherever, and they'd just think, what am I supposed to do with this? So we focus on small areas. And I don't think, I think there's a real issue about, once you've used audit and feedback in one area, do you have to maintain feedback in that area? Can you stop it and invest elsewhere? Are there risks of doing that in terms of information creeping back up? So it's an open question. Although we know that in general audit and feedback works, there are many secondary questions. How, why, under what circumstances will audit and feedback work best? How do we optimize it? How does it fit into workflows? How do we avoid decay effects? So although, if you like, we know audit and feedback in general works, there's a career for bright young implementation scientists really sort of nailing this down.
Okay. So you had mentioned at the beginning how the systematic review shows 4 to 6% absolute effect. So, and we talk about, how a win in implementation science is, 4% behavior change. That's amazing. Are we maybe selling ourselves short? Why aren't we demanding more, expecting more? Why do we accept 4%?
Um, I think I mean, we've been, Andy Oxman, very dear colleague, in 1996 published a paper that said no magic bullets. There has been research that's ongoing since, I first implementation trials about in the mid 70s. And it's not that there are major, magic bullets that'll have large effects that are out there. And I think this reflects that the complexity of the issues that we're facing. And also this sort of, this lack of clarity about how interventions fit into contexts and problems. And if we understood that better, we may be able to improve that. But whenever we're trying to change things in our lives, if we were going to wait until we could make our lives perfect, we would never do anything. We need to start with what we can do and then build on that and build on that. So if you take the audit and feedback review, I think about 25%, or the median effect or the central effect is about 4 to 6%. But I think there are 25% of studies that get more than a 16% absolute improvement. There are 25% of studies that get less than 1% improvement. So that's what we were operating within. So if we could understand better, we might be able to get closer to the 16%. But it shouldn't stop us from starting the journey. And a couple of additional things. As I said, if you take audit and feedback for antibiotic prescribing, antibiotic overuse, major driver antimicrobial resistance. There's now has published a sort of review, which is a subset of the audit and feedback trials, looking at audit and feedback for antibiotics in primary care. About 44 studies, and audit and feedback for antibiotics reduces the initiation of any antibiotic by about, I think it is 4 or 5%. Reduces inappropriate antibiotic prescribing by 11%, reduces use of broad spectrum antibiotics, can't remember by what percent, and also reduces the length of courses of antibiotics. Globally, AMR is such a big challenge. Why isn't audit and feedback antibiotic part and parcel of every single country of plans? There will be challenges in the global south, in countries where there aren't data systems, but we also have colleagues in Kenya, in KEMRI, who've developed amazing sophisticated data systems and done a lot of really important work. So we can start now addressing issues that I don't think there's any other area of AMR where we have a solution that we know would lead to 4 or 5% reduction in antibiotics at a population level. Second reason is it often saves money for healthcare systems. 3.5% or 3.5 times return on investment for audit and feedback in antibiotics is huge. Why wouldn't you cost save? Why wouldn't you choose to do that? And the third thing is even modest effects can have a major impact on people's lives. So another colleague, Sarah Alderson in the UK, has been providing feedback on opioid prescribing in primary care. And she could demonstrate that they got a 1% reduction in opioid prescribing. And most people say, oh, that's really bad. It's not good. Why would you do it? And Sarah says that's 17,000 people who avoided having an opioid prescription. And it also saved the NHS by £1 million. But what Sarah is now doing, because her patient partners said, well, 1% isn't much. Well, let's work on this to get it from 1% to 3% to 6%. So why don't we start now? Because we're never going to have a perfect system that will take us from here to here. But let's go here to here, and then we can work out how to go from here to here, and then we can work out how to go from here to here. David Halpern, who was the head of the UK Behavioural Insights Group, has a nice lecture, which is this is how, say, the British team or cycle team became the Olympic champions. They didn't wait until they had the perfect technology. It's like, okay, we're going to look at the nutrition. We're going to look at sleep patterns. We're going to look at apps, the technology, how to reduce the weight of the bike, how to increase streamlining. And all those little bits led to world-leading performance. Whereas if they were kind of waiting for the one solution, the UK would not be as dominant a force as it is in cycling. So there you go.
Okay. So we're almost at time, but I want to ask you two more questions. What advice you mentioned earlier, the young generation. So those are the ones that are listening to these podcasts. What advice would you give to a young researcher feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of implementation science, the endless amount of frameworks, the plethora of potential interventions? Give them a practical takeaway.
So one of my worries is in implementation science is we are developing lots of theories, models, and frameworks, but not actually testing them. And so we're just generating noise. My personal view about implementation science is it's a very applied science that is trying to provide insights to healthcare systems about how they can improve the care that their professionals provide to improve the outcomes of patients. And we should be holding ourselves to that test. So instead of sort of say, you could choose an area to work and start working, but always I think you need to sort of think about, I want to eventually test whether an intervention based upon this insight or this type of intervention actually leads to improvements in care. I don't want people to create noise. I want people to create knowledge that is helpful. And even if you spend 10 years working in an area and you find actually that the intervention that you've been working on or the model doesn't work, that's good. That is a contribution to science. Carlo Rovelli, who's an amazing Italian physicist, talks about, in science, it's not necessarily are you right or wrong, it's about being part of the conversation. So I think for young researchers, be incredibly rigorous. Always be self-critical. Choose big problems, but choose to take them on in a way that's likely to lead to sort of applied knowledge will be helpful for healthcare service people. Make sure you enjoy what you're doing. Make sure you work with people who are good. Oh, no, not people good, people you enjoy working with. If they're good, that's good as well. But take on big issues and work at them for a while, but always think that the end goal is, am I generating some knowledge that will be helpful for a decision maker in a government, in a healthcare system, in a hospital, about how they can improve the care that their patients are getting.
Okay, thank you. So one final question. Even though I'm in denial about the fact that you recently retired, you did recently retire. How are you enjoying retirement?
Retirement is wonderful. Let me show you where I am today. So this is going to feel very strange and weird for people in Israel, but this is sort of basically our cottage. The lake is down there, though it's covered with snow and ice. And I'm going to spend a lot of time here. And then if I turn this round, you can see that I have about 1,000 LPs and 2,000 CDs and a nice system. And I'm going to spend a lot of time listening to, thinking about music and having fun. And I've got lots of projects that are that will keep me busy. So one other thing for early career researchers is make sure that you maintain and invest in outside interests and activities. Make sure you have some part of your life that's about living and you're not just working, because then when you retire, you've got lots of things that you want to do. So, but I'm going to have great fun, Moriah. I'm sure we'll stay in touch. But this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. No, really. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I hope we can interview you again the next little while, that you're not escaping anywhere during your retirement.
Okay, I'm doing my best though. There's a shelf life. 6 months time. Maybe you don't want to talk to me. That's fine. That's good.
No, that's not true. We always want a piece of Jeremy. Okay, thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.